It's 10 hours.
This is Saurabh, and you're listening to my favorite talk show, The Weekly Show with Aditya.
This is episode 360 on the 5th of May 2021, and I welcome you to this beautiful Wednesday morning episode. Let's begin the episode with this popular quote: Monarchy and democracy are two sides of the same coin, the only difference being esoteric elections. The last 15 months have seen democratically elected governments and the head of governments turn into dictators, and citizens have become inmates with governments threatening to imprison their own citizens. Now let's move on. What are the highlights for this beautiful morning's episode? The first will be discussing my favorite fictional gadgets, which were once upon a time thought to be fantastic and unrealistic, and now nearly 4 to 5 decades later, we use these very gadgets as if these gadgets have existed for millennia. And then the second discussion will be cancel bio bubble muddle. Let's move on. TV shows like Knight Rider, Get Smart, Star Trek, James Bond, The Man from Uncle, and many more. The writers introduced technology that was thought to be fantastical and fictional and impossible, but now may be realistic and possible. Even something as mundane as IoT did not catch the fancy of the scientists when the writers wrote it into the program. For example, something as innovative as the shoe phone used by the character in Get Smart, or the cone of silence, which he insisted on using every time he wanted to tell his boss something secretive. Now let's start with Kit, that is Knight Rider. Who was Michael Knight? Knight Rider, a shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist. Michael Knight, a young loner on a crusade to champion the cause of the innocent, the helpless, the powerless in a world of criminals who operate above the law. Maybe at this point in time, we need someone like a Knight Rider, that is Robin Hood, using a vehicle as his trusty steed instead of a horse. But will that happen? We don't know. Let's understand what Kit is. Who Kit is. Kit is a precursor to the craze around self-driven AI powered cars. Look at this and read this carefully. A super powered, intelligent, souped up Pontiac Trans Am. Kit can drive 300 miles an hour, is bulletproof, fireproof, can talk, and helps Michael fight injustices in the world. Well, let's not assume the fighting injustices part, but won't we be ecstatic if we have a car that can drive more than 300 miles an hour, is bulletproof? Well, all the heads of government would enjoy this vehicle. Fireproof, well, the fire department would be out of a job. Then a super part intelligent souped up vehicle, it could be any vehicle. And if you look at the dashboard on your right, it looks like the dashboard from an airplane. And even the steering wheel is not a typical steering wheel. And that's what the 1982 TV show Knight Rider has made things possible, that a few companies who won't be named because I have zero respect from them want to go up to the extent of having self-driven AI powered cars, but the experiments have failed up till now. Will that happen? Because this is a combination of all that we want. 300 miles an hour, I can go from Delhi to Bombay in hours. I can sleep in the car while the car drives. It can fill itself up. It could be even an electronic driven car. It can recharge itself with solar powered cells on its roof. When needed, I can go from manual to autopilot mode, back to manual mode. It's an airplane but with wheels and on the ground, and that is all we want. And then can talk. Well, don't we have such craze that we can talk back to the computer with gadgets like Alexa and Siri and all these things? But Alexa is still a long way to go. I'm not impressed by either Siri or Alexa because that information can be misused, but we'll talk about that later. But this was one of the best TV shows I've ever seen because it made things, impossible things, probable. Let's move on. Let's look at the theme of Star Trek: space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. We shall discuss this more, but before that, a short break. Welcome back after the break. Let's look at the theme again: space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Of course, the creators of Star Trek must have been influenced by the many European explorers who traveled by sea to strange new worlds, discovered worlds like Africa, Australia, America, and up to even some extent India. And then they sought out new life and new civilizations. Here it doesn't mention to influence them in so many ways, but that also must have been the mission. And here, instead of traveling on a ship on water, they're traveling on a starship. But the priorities remain the same. There is an engineer, there is a communications person, there is a captain, there's a lieutenant, there's the ship's doctor, there's the helmsman, except that instead of a steering wheel, they're using buttons to steer the ship, and then they go through many adventures. And Star Trek is beyond gadgets. It even up to some extent mocks the very idea of what we mean by civilization, how we look at people in terms of race, color, and whatnot. If you look at what the creators of Star Trek did, they moved beyond such minor and mundane things which we still hang on to right now. Now let's move on to the theme of the other Star Trek series. Theme of Star Trek The Next Generation: Space, the Final Frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise, its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Once again, the same mission for the characters, except that there's a change of characters, there's a new captain, new lieutenant, there are few more individuals added. If for Star Trek, the original series, Spock was the alien amongst them, they added a Klingon. They had their issues with Klingon and Romulans, but they added a Klingon as their security officer, and that is how Star Trek, all the Star Trek TV shows, whether it's Voyager, The Enterprise, Deep Space Nine, original series, the way they looked at, the way the writers wrote relationship between different people on different planets, they mock the very idea of violence, how violence still is subsumed, how we still are consumed by petty things like violence. And why do violence happen? Everyone knows violence is a result of the narrow thinking of civilization. You may call yourself civilized, but once we accept violence, we are not civilized. Now let's move on to the various gadgets in the Star Trek universe. The most impressive gadget was the communicator, the flip phone. If you have seen Captain Kirk, James T. Kirk, when they land on a planet or they are not on the ship, they use to send audio messages from the land to the vessel using radio technology. Of course, the gadgets, the idea of exploration, the Star Trek creators would have been influenced by the scientists and the explorers at the same time, and Star Trek must have also had a role to play in many missions which the actual scientists took when they sent missions, unmanned, manned space missions to different planets. And that's how they got the idea of course, radio technology was already present. Radio was already present, the wireless communications was already there, except that here it's wireless. The most important thing is that it's wireless. It's very similar to the pager that was used once upon a time, or mobile phone, or a cellular phone that was used once upon a time. Star Trek in its later editions even paved the way for going paperless with tablet like iPad, the touch technology that we rave about. There are a lot of great Star Trek gadgets which may become reality right now. Even the concept of hologram or virtual reality, that we meet someone without actually meeting them, which means if I want to go back to 1947 and see what were the conditions like, I enter the exact time and date on the computer. The computer goes
It's
in its
10:15.
data banks creates that imagination. I enter that room, and then the people, the trees, the condition are exactly created as was programmed in the computer. Remember this, even in holograms, the computer does not imagine these things. Such ideas have been programmed into the computer, or they talk to the computer, which we do with such pride in the present scenario, and then the hologram or virtual reality which we use using a visor is created. Virtual reality would mean that I am over there, but I'm not really over there. Everyone I see around me are computer generated images, not real. Of course, in the TV show, they were real, but the idea was to show that if we are bored, I can do that, which means I may not go out, but I can create an atmosphere where I can actually go out without going out. Is this becoming a possibility? Yes, but is it influenced by the holograms in these Star Trek TV shows and even up to some extent Star Wars? Of course, that's the way it is. Star Trek, Star Wars, as I said, they have influenced the current generations and post Star Trek generations of scientists and writers. Let's move on. Perhaps one of my favorite characters along with Spock is Data, but we shall talk about it or him after this short break. Welcome back after the break. Let's talk about Data along with Spock, one of my favorite characters. While everyone knows about Spock the Vulcan, the rational, logical human being who sees emotions as something that is not part of the intellectual mind. On on one hand there's Spock, but on the other hand there's the character of Data. Data, a robot with human flesh, but instead of vessels and organs, he has circuits and hard drives inside him or inside it. Whether Data is a male or female is subjective to discussion. In contemporary times where humans give excuses not to work, Data is exactly the AI we are looking for. Looks human, talks human, but possesses none of the human emotions. The excuses for being tired means Data will not probably catch the flu. If you remember, Sophie, a robot which was developed, is very close to what the idea of Data is. If you have read about Sophie, but when you look at her and you look at it or her or whatever the gender may be in real time through news or through newspapers, you can still see it moves about in a robotic fashion. Wouldn't you love to have a robot who just of course this is fictional, it was a real human being acting as a robot, but this is the closest that can be created, that is tomorrow in your body instead of vessels and organs, and in your brain instead of that complex brain you have the CPU. Everything else is the same, but just like human beings, it can fall sick. How can a computer fall sick? Even a computer falls prey to a virus, and that is why a virus is a much feared entity. And ironically, data mocks humans by trying to program himself or itself to be more human. He wants to laugh and cry while humans want to hide it. If you want to understand more about data, it would be better if you saw the TV show and you saw Star Trek, all the additions beyond the idea of gadgets, or balance gadgets with the actual mockery of civilization, and how they imagine that in the 24th century there are no wars, no violence, no casteism, no racism, nothing of this kind. And that's what they are trying to project. But more on this later. Let's talk about this bio bubble model. But before we go into that, let's take a short break. Welcome back after the break. The bio bubble model. Cancel the bio bubble model. The Indian 20 over domestic World Cup has been hit by the flu, not surprisingly, due to whatever reasons, whatever SOPs not followed or fragile SOPs, that's not my concern. It has been hit by the flu, as players and officials are looking to leave the bubble and go back into the discomfort of their own homes. The critics are laughing inside as their insidious comments about the tournament being privileged got the result exactly as they wanted. A few individuals who were jealous of this tournament because the players, the officials, and other individuals involved were getting privilege, special testing, special flights, this and that. They must be laughing. Yes, we kept on criticizing it. It was hit by the flu, and finally, the Indian Cricket Board, which is known to bully others, was bullied into cancelling, suspending, postponing the tournament, whatever nomenclature we may want to add. The Indian Cricket Board was forced to cancel the entire competition as they ran out of critical stakeholders and outside pressure, as the negative campaigning of stay home, stay safe continues. Now, what can be done? They presume that this tournament can be resumed in September, but with this, there's another caveat. The World Cup, that is the 20 over World Championship, which is organized by the International Cricket Council. Now there's pressure on them to postpone the tournament or shift the tournament to UAE. Remember, for a major part of 7 years, a neighboring country which was also hit by a certain situation, teams refused to travel over there and they had to make UAE the home base. Will this happen with India? It could be a possibility, but that's something we shall discuss later on. And let's move on. Look at this photo and tell me what you think. Is this the last resort that will happen as far as the definition of bio bubble is concerned? For me, it's not about whether the players were hit by the flu. I think it was more about the containment or the prison like environment they were forced in, rather than the flu hitting them for whatever reasons. Even if you are fit, if your mind doesn't accept things, you can fall prey, and maybe it just exaggerates and this is what happens. But this photo could be the last straw that will happen. In fact, hitting the floor was the straw that broke the championship's back. And this ends episode number 360 on the 5th of May 2021. Stay tuned for the next episode number 361 titled Shawn and Sherlock on 7th May 2021 at 10 a.m. IST.
For more awesome content, tune in to the next episode of the weekly show.